Good morning Apex University, my name is Dan and I'll be your coach for today, and today I'd like to talk about a very common issue, which is panicking while you play. Now we're going to be looking at a gameplay on the PS4 by Strider. He gets a pretty good game, but I can notice in his gameplay that he misses his shots as soon as he panics. And this is not uncommon. I'm sure we all know the feeling of getting rushed by an opponent you weren't expecting and wildly flailing your gun about in an attempt to hit them before they absolutely destroy you. In those moments with somebody right up on your face that you weren't expecting, it's really common to constantly overshoot and shoot around them. Now one way you could avoid this is by sitting on a safe high ground with a sniper and just not being in any danger at all, but for most of us that's not a very enjoyable playstyle. Much like Strider here, we like getting in on the action and we like a bit more aggression in our gameplay. So because of that, I'm going to give you a very simple piece of advice that will allow you to prevent a lot of the panic that you'll notice while still keeping up a good momentum in your gameplay. So let's look at where you drop. You and your teammates decide to drop in Skull Town, and you and one of your teammates both do the right thing of pinging the actual building where you intend to land. This is so that your teammates know where you are and they can base their drop off of that. The problem is that you and this teammate both ping the actual location where you want to land too late, so there's no time for anybody to adjust their course. Shortly after, you're kicked out of the building where you want to land and you have to go to an inferior looting spot. Now you get lucky, you find both a weapon and an armor, but in this patch it could easily happen that one of those just wasn't there and you're surrounded by two enemies here not close to your teammates. So remember to ping a little bit earlier where you intend to land, or break off a little bit later so that you end up closer to your teammate. Alright, after landing you find yourself a weapon and an armor like we said, and an enemy drops from the roof in front of you. Now judging by the fact that this bloodhound is flailing around like a Magikarp punching the air and jumping, I'm going to assume that he didn't find a weapon up there, that or he failed to pull it out. You panic, you try to spam your prowler at him hip firing and you end up overshooting and missing him a lot. In this situation, had you stayed calm and just taken your time with your shots, you may not have emptied your mag as quickly, but you would have actually hit more of them. You would have gotten the kill faster and you wouldn't have wasted as much ammo. Now you still get the kill on him, so that's nice, and I know that it's tempting to spam weapons as fast as you can, especially if you see good players shooting people and killing people as soon as they appear on their screen, but we all started out slow. We needed a bunch of time to aim and to hit our shots because we just weren't that good yet, and while you're improving your aim, over time you'll end up getting faster and faster. But never sacrifice accuracy for speed. There's no point in instantly emptying a mag if every bullet is going to miss. This is especially important with weapons that deal a lot of damage at once. Think of shotguns and snipers. It's super common that people try to spam shotguns as fast as they can shoot because they're pretty slow. But shotguns deal so much damage in close quarters combat, you can easily hold your shot for a moment where the enemy is still or predictable and it's an easy to hit shot. You can even wait for them to walk into your crosshair and then take it, and you'll down them much more easily, even though you're not shooting as fast. So how do we achieve that? How do you approach a fight in such a way that you can stay calm throughout it? Well, I already mentioned that a safe position helps a lot by decreasing the pressure that you're under. But the main thing that builds pressure or causes panic is you being overwhelmed by new inputs, either stuff happening too quickly or stuff that you weren't expecting. So the way to counteract that is to be more aware of your surroundings and to anticipate what the opponents are going to do. If you're already aware where the enemies are and where they're going to be shooting you from, then it's not quite as scary. You know what to do and you can take your time. But if you turn a corner and an enemy happens to be standing right there with a peacekeeper, you're probably going to panic and miss a bunch of shots. So what I want you to do is whenever you go to a new area, any situation that you're not aware of, I want you to give yourself just a split second to stand still in a safe spot and check your surroundings. Take in any new information around you. Are there enemies? Is it looted? Do you hear gunshots? Do you see supply drops? This also means that whenever you go into an area where you don't already know everything that's going on, the moment you turn the corner and give yourself that split second to figure stuff out, if there is an enemy there, you're not going to be caught off guard, because you gave yourself time in a safe spot to figure out who was there. So now you might be wondering what I mean by a new area. Does this mean every 3 steps you take you stand still and zoom in and check the entire map? Not quite. That can help, but it'll make your gameplay very slow. Instead, this game works quite a lot with chokes in the overall map and with buildings too, so I want you to think of two types of chokes. There's building chokes, those are windows and doorways, and then there's map chokes, those are the valleys that cut through the mountains that separate the different biomes in the map. Stuff like the bunker is of course also a choke. Whenever you make your way towards a new area in the map by going through one of these chokes, just give yourself a second to stand still behind some cover and look around and just take in anything in the area going on around you. Are there teams? Is it looted? Has there been a fight here? Anything that might make you aware of where enemies might be if you're about to get into a fight. And this buys you the time to not only carefully aim and hit your shots properly, but also to engage in a way that is in your favor. So if we use this Thunderdome fight as an example, this area doesn't have a clear choke, but it does have a large ridge surrounding it, this bank of sand, and you have to go over it in order to see the next area. So this choke is basically like a spread out wall you have to traverse. So the moment you go over that wall, just give yourself some time to stand still and figure out where these enemies are exactly before rushing in. Then based on where they are and what weapons you're running, you can figure out how you want to approach. In this case you're running a triple take and a peacekeeper, so you probably want to deal some snipe damage first before finding a way to flank in closer. Now you do deal some damage with the triple take first, so far so good, but then you just seem to be running in forward. You're not using the terrain, you're not flanking, you're not using cover, and you really haven't checked where all the enemies are or who you want to prioritize. So I can see the underlying understanding and skill being there, but you're just not giving yourself the time to set up a plan. Alright, so after finishing that fight, you grab a R99 to replace your triple take, and you now have a very aggressive close range loadout. So whenever you go to a new area and stand still to figure out where people are, if you do see enemies and you use that time to figure out a plan of action, I don't want to see you standing on a high ground sniping with your team, because you're just not going to be very effective. Instead, I want to see you try to find safe ways to flank or get in close quarters combat with the enemies, or punish them for being isolated where you can get close, anything that works with your loadout. So as we approach the next fight in River Center here, I feel a bit conflicted, because the way you and your teammates hold this little hill here is very nice. You give yourself some time to figure out what's going on, you have decent sightlines, it's defendable, you didn't take a shot too early. But if your teammates are spamming their flatlines and R301s and Spitfires right now, there's not really anything you can do. So while they're playing from this position, I really would have liked to see you figure out a flanking route so that you can actually be effective once the fight starts, rather than ending up being stuck at mid-range. However, after your teammate puts down a jump pad, I really like your play here. You go onto the roof and use the crack to punish an opponent that isn't expecting you, and even if he was looking at you, it's incredibly difficult to hit you back right there, so that's an incredibly good play. The only other thing I could possibly mention is when you dropped on the balcony and saw the door was blocked by a caustic trap, I would instantly drop back down, because there's not much you can do against that and the enemies can still open the door, so there's no point waiting there, but the fight was over a second later, so it's alright. After looting up from that fight, you guys spot another team on the high ground going through the mountain, and you follow them all the way over to the farm. Now this is a new area that you're approaching, so I want to see you stop, check your surroundings and figure out a plan of action. You already know there's one enemy team here, but are there more, or is there anything else that might be useful to you? And you still have a pretty close range loadout. How are you going to flank to use it effectively? By scouting the area, after all, you can figure out a safe route to get closer to the enemies rather than just running in and seeing what happens. And the start of this fight, you get a very quick knock on the Octane, but I just want to pause right there and use that as an example of how good this play could have been. If we look at your natural pathing, you take high ground quite often, and this is very good. But right now your strategy for your path is just holding forward until you see an enemy, and then you even keep holding forward most of the time when you're fighting them. If instead you had stopped at the opening in the mountain, you would have seen that the farm on your side is clear and you can move up closer up to the wall. There you stop again for half a second, you check your surroundings and figure out that the enemies are on the other side of the house. Then when you push forward just like you did before and go on this little high ground, you can stop at this fence and shoot the Octane from there. You would have probably downed him just as fast as he simply wasn't aware of you. But you would have been in a very powerful and safe position from which you could continue the fight or figure out your next plan for the next opponent after downing the Octane, rather than just running in and seeing what happens. If we look at how you fight the Bangalore, you're not really using your surroundings at all, you're not making a plan, and you're just moving forward towards them until they're dead. You could be using the cover around you, you could be strafing, and most of the damage that you take in all of these fights could have been prevented quite easily. That in turn would make you far less susceptible not only to dying in that fight, but also to being third-partied. So I can see that you have the natural instinct to take high ground and move near cover quite naturally. I just think if you gave yourself the time to actually make a plan, those skills would really come to fruition. As another enemy team shows up, we can instantly see what I was talking about with the limitations of your loadout. At this range, there's simply not that much you're going to do to help your teammates, so instead, you want to be making a plan for how you're going to close the distance. Then, you end up looting, and I'm not quite sure why you're looting here. You have a really good loadout, you have purple armor and heals and even grenades, everything you need, so taking the damage from this grenade here is unnecessary, and you're already in a fight, so I think you should be focusing on that. After healing up and moving forward, your teammates have pressed the enemies into a difficult position where they're stuck in a Gibraltar bubble, so now this situation is not only very predictable, but you also have a very easy way in because they can't shoot you from the inside of the bubble and your teammates are covering the area. So I would like to see you close the distance as you do, and as you do, the Watson jumps out, who is now far within your effective range, so it's an easy kill. The only other thing I can comment about this fight is that you instantly decide to go into the enemy shield bubble before checking where they are, and there's no need. Once you do that, all you're doing is creating a fair gunfight. But there's no need to give them a fair gunfight. You can literally just walk around the shield and aim at them before you walk in. Because you are closer to the shield than them, there's not much they can do. If they exit on their side, they get shot by your teammates, and if they exit on your side, you just step forward and shoot them. Again, give yourself at least half a second per fight to at least make a plan rather than just holding forward. But let's move on to the next one. As soon as you spot the enemies, we see you straight running forward again without a plan. Now luckily you do use cover on one side to make sure you fight only one opponent at a time, as you were running straight towards two. But I still think this would have gone a lot better had you actually figured out what you wanted to do or what these enemies were doing before you just rushed in there. Essentially, unless you run into an incredibly skilled player, if you've got this full close range loadout, you should play in such a way that you shouldn't be losing any 1v1s in close range. So the moment you go down here, you should realize that you didn't approach this fight correctly. Luckily, your teammates res you and clean up, and now it's up to you to clutch. A very nice clean knock on the Watson, who doesn't strafe at all, and here we can see why strafing is so important, something that you don't do quite enough, by the way. And as you're fighting the Pathfinder, we see you using a little bit of cover at the start, but then as soon as he moves to the right, you keep crouching in the same spot, so you're not actually blocking line of sight from him. Luckily, he also doesn't strafe and move in a straight line, so then it just becomes a straight aim duel, which you win. GG. But to conclude, I think your biggest problem is that you're playing on autopilot. You're just holding forward until something happens and then you're dealing with it rather than making a plan first and then executing it. So I would really like to see you build a habit of stopping whenever you're unsure about a situation and just taking all the information in. If there's nothing going on, that's fine and you move on to the next safe place. Now, no teamfight ever goes exactly as you had expected it, but that doesn't matter. Just having a plan and something to focus on distracts you from all the things that aren't important and allows you to focus on what's going to win you the fight. By focusing on your effective loadout, you know you're going to get some value. All you have to do is stay alive and be in the right place. By preventing yourself from getting overwhelmed, you can stay calm and play far better. I really hope that was helpful. Peace.